The man who would become known as Finn was born around 7 years after the Battle of Endor. He had no recollection of his childhood as he was taken by the First Order, trained to become a stormtrooper. Finn only ever had one name during his time with the post-Galactic Empire faction, his designation, FN-2187. Although he was taught about the evil ways of the Republic and how the First Order brought laws to a lawless galaxy, 2187 never truly fitted in with the other stormtroopers. He was just too different. Welcome to part 1 of Finn's life story. Today we will be looking at his training in the First Order and how exactly he began doubting his future with the faction. FN-2187 was the leader of a fire team consisting of 4 members, 4 cadets to be precise, as they were not fully stormtroopers yet. Although they called each other by their full letter and number designations around officers and Captain Fasma, the stormtroopers gave themselves shorter names. FN-2199 was called Nines due to the last 2 numbers in his code. FN-2000 went by the name Zeros because of the 3 zeros in his designation, and FN-2003 was the only member to have a proper nickname, being called Slip. FN-2187 was sometimes shortened to just 87. However, the fire team never used it much. In complete contrast to Slip, who was arguably the weakest member in the squad, someone who was very clumsy and not the brightest, FN-2187 was an incredibly gifted stormtrooper. His fellow soldiers and officers thought he would become the ideal stormtrooper as he had all the traits needed: loyalty, strength, intelligence and bravery. He was always grouped in the top 1% in scores, and Captain Fasma had high hopes for him. However, FN-2187 just didn't feel at home training in the First Order. He didn't seem to fit in. Doubts often crept into his head. Although 2187's only perception of the galaxy had been filtered through to him by the First Order, he never questioned whether it was the truth or not. However, during the daily morale sessions, basically propaganda messages, he only applauded them and cheered so to not stand out. He really wasn't like the others. Although the fire team had not been deployed on the battlefield, they faced simulations that felt real. In one particular scenario, Slip had fallen behind. Although the other members didn't care much for FN-2003's lack of ability, FN-2187 always had a soft spot for him. Seeing Republic soldiers advance on Slip's position, 2187 halted the objective and went back for him. Displaying his incredible skills, FN-2187 took out all of the enemy soldiers with his rifle. After rescuing Slip, the fire team continued their mission, which was to take out a Republic-held bunker. Because the squad was split, the enemy fire was also split. Using this to his advantage, 2187 rushed the bunker. Taking cover against the structure, he rolled out and threw a grenade into its opening. The mission was a success, and the simulation environment faded away. Standing at the room's observation window, General Hux and Captain Fasma discussed the fire team's performance. Hux was pleased with the effort, but was disappointed by Slip. In addition, he raised concerns over FN-2187. Although Fasma told him that 2187 had the potential to be one of the best stormtroopers created by the First Order, Hux, though in agreement, didn't like the fact he isolated himself from the rest of the team and risked the mission to go back for FN-2003. Hux ended the conversation by telling Fasma to improve 2187. The team waited for Fasma's feedback in a briefing room after the simulation. FN-2187 could see that Slip was nervous, for obvious reasons, and that the other 2 were confident. Although the leader knew he was the one who completed the objective, he was unsure how Fasma would react to his decision to go back for FN-2003. When the captain entered the room, clad in her unique metallic armour, the fire team immediately stood up and looked forward. Not being one for going over the top, Fasma said the simulation went adequately. She told Zeros that his aim was incredibly bad, and Nines had a heart rate that was far too high. The captain didn't even say anything to Slip. She just stared him down through her helmet. Fasma then went on to FN-2187, saying that he killed 42 enemies. 6 of them were with the grenade at the end, and the other 36 were with his rifle. The stormtrooper had only wasted one bullet throughout the entire situation, something that pleased Fasma. She told the other 3 members to take example from their leader. The captain then dismissed the fire team, except from FN 2187. When the two were alone, Fasma followed Hux's orders. She asked FN 2187 why he went back for FN 2003, knowing it was not the first time he had helped him during simulations. The stormtrooper told her that FN 2003 was one of them. Surprising FN 2187, Fasma told him to stop helping the cadet. She reminded him of his role in the First Order, and that the organisation did not allow weakness. They eliminated it. Slip was weakening the squad. He would only be allowed to fall on his own, not with the rest of the team. FN 2187 reluctantly agreed to leave FN 2003 alone in his moment of weaknesses. A few days afterwards, 2187 noticed that activity in the base had accelerated. There was a new sense of urgency, and the stormtroopers' lessons had changed. They began studying historical conflicts, such as the Clone Wars, for tactics and other appropriate things. With the new sudden rush schedule, the stormtroopers were put under a lot of pressure. Although the 4 all felt the pressure, it was Slip who struggled the most, making a lot of mistakes. FN 2187 wanted to help him out, but he remembered what Fasma said and so left him alone. He felt very bad for not stepping in. It was tough for 2187 to watch his fellow cadet struggle. Not long after, Zeros, after overhearing a conversation between instruction officers, revealed to his squad mates that they had been given accelerated training because they were going to be deployed very soon. The fire team faced up to 3 simulations a day, all being massive battles, with TIE fighters engaging X-Wings in the air and stormtroopers battling Republic soldiers on the ground. FN 2187 was finding it easier to leave Slip behind when he went down, something he did every simulation, knowing they weren't yet on the real battlefield. Following one of the large simulations, Fasma praised FN 2187 in front of hundreds of others, telling everyone to aspire to be like him, to match his skill, efficiency and ruthlessness. Although honoured, the stormtrooper felt very embarrassed. In an exercise room the following day, the fire team and many others began to train in melee combat. The cadets were taught how to use vibroaxes, force pikes, resonator maces and shock staffs. They were told each weapon's strengths and weaknesses. They were all powerful tools, some even strong enough to block lightsaber attacks, though this made 2187 question the likelihood of fighting against a lightsaber. After all, the First Order claimed all the Jedi were dead. FN 2187 was given a mace along with a shield. FN 2003 and FN 2000 were both handed force pikes, and FN 2199 was given a vibroaxe and a shield. They learned the basics of using the weapons and shields, with the goal of fighting each other the following morning. The next day came, and the instructors chose 2 men to start the sparring. In a winner stays on situation, the losing combatant would be the first to fall to the ground, or to be ruled the loser by the instructors. Slip became the first member of the fire team to be called up to the floor. FN 2187 worried for Slip, of course knowing he was full of mistakes. After some back and forth combat, FN 2003 was knocked to the ground, left to join the back of the line. When called up, Zeros did incredibly well. He tore through 4 opponents before coming face to face with 2187. Although Zeros put up a great fight, FN 2187 showed exactly why he was often praised so much. After falling to the ground, Zeros angrily barged past his leader. After somewhat easily defeating his first challenger, he was faced with another member of his squad, Nines. It was an incredibly tough fight for both men. After aggressive strikes from Nines, 2187 realised that his opponent was treating the training as if it were a real fight. However, FN 2187 once again reigned victorious. He soon reached Zero's streak by defeating 4 enemies. To surpass it, he just had to beat Slip. FN 2003 seemed to still be suffering from his first bout, and so was not moving like he usually would. Zeros was very sloppy. However, fighting with his conscience, he didn't want to easily beat him, as he would look even weaker in everyone's eyes. On the flip side, 2187 didn't want to lose, as Slip would just be beaten, probably badly, by the next challenger. Eventually putting his opponent out his misery, FN2187 knocked him to the ground. He then noticed that Fasma was watching, something that put him off, causing him to lose to his next challenger, and causing him to lose his streak. After the training, FN2187 was approached by Fasma. She asked if he felt sympathetic towards FN2003, if he considered losing to him. FN2187 tried to tell her that he was injured and shouldn't have been hurt even more, but the captain reminded him that a stormtrooper should not feel emotions such as sympathy. She followed this by telling him his fire team was about to face their first deployment. Alongside another few squads, the fire team were taken to a transport and then went into orbit. They all had their armour on and had F-11D blasters, real rifles, not like the ones from training. Anticipation heightened between the squads when they saw a massive Star Destroyer, though none of them still knew of their objective. The transport landed in the hangar area, then the squads were separated and made their way to barracks. Shortly after, the Star Destroyer entered hyperspace. Although the other 3 members managed to fit in with the other stormtroopers, FN2187 was left out. The other new faces actually commented on him not having a nickname. They said he was an outsider. The objective was to restore order to a mining colony which had been infiltrated by Republic agents who had disrupted the work, causing a little rebellion. The fire team was part of the second squad to land on the colony. Fearing a hostile reception, the 4 fire teams exited the shuttle quickly, in a tight formation and with their guns ready to fire. However, the loading bay was empty apart from the first transporter. Another fire team ordered FN2187 and his men to guard the bay's entrance, something they did for what seemed like forever. From this position, 2187 could see the massive mining complex and some of the workers, being a mix of aliens, and all looking malnourished and sick. Shortly after, Fasma contacted FN2187 and told him to relocate to her position. They met Fasma outside a room where she said the negotiators were, or the striking miners. The stormtroopers accompanied the captain into the room, where they encountered 3 aliens and 1 human. She told the miners that she had thought about their request, presumably their end of the bargain, and after turning to the fire team, gave the order, kill them. Initially no shots were fired. The squad were still trying to digest what was just said. However, trying to impress Fasma, Slip began the shooting. Soon enough, all the stormtroopers were laying waste to the 4, all except FN2187. Although he had his rifle raised, one of the aliens in his sights, he just couldn't do it. Slip ended up killing the miner. After the successful mission, 2187 went immediately to a simulation room aboard the Star Destroyer. He chose a mode that started easy but slowly got harder. He managed to breeze past the first few stages. However, he couldn't take his mind off the helpless, defenceless miners shot down in cold blood. Although he chose to train in the simulation to try and become a real stormtrooper, address some of the problems that made him stand out so much, he was just reminded of how different he was to everyone else. He eventually realised that this life was not for him. He just didn't have it in him to be a stormtrooper. On a monitor in her quarters, Fasma watched FN2187. She saw him just standing there, being fired at, failing the simulation. It displeased the captain to know that he was such a good prospect with an incredibly bright future, but just was showing signs of weakness. She realised that it was really too late to do anything. The Star Destroyer was already travelling through hyperspace to coordinates sent directly from Kylo Ren. She watched FN2187 slowly exit the training room as the simulation was declared a failure. She was going to give him one last chance. Maybe he would behave differently when being fired at by real enemies, fighting for his life, fighting for the First Order. It would really be go big or go home for 2187 on the desert world of Jakku. Finn is one of the main protagonists in The Force Awakens, and appears to regret joining the First Order. Yep, totally nailed it. Look at that smackaroonie.